Clips, clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe and hit the bell. Everything will be well in 1995. Plus, shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Why does a dog wag its tail? Because a dog is smarter than its tail. If the tail were smarter, the tail would wag the dog. Wag the dog in politics is the act of creating diversion from a damaging issue. Here at Wag the Dog News, the tail doesn't wag the dog. Enjoy.
Clips, clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the bell. Everything will be well. 1995. Plus, shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Out of hell. Alrighty, boob tubes. Another one of Kip's clips have went a wee bit early because it looks like Bojo is going to be making a wee speech. So we'll have a keep a wee eye on that, I'd reckon.
Street has the lady on the floor, just like Sloane Finn, Baroness Finn, one of his key advisors, was once actually an advisor, do you remember, to Michael Gove. She's there, one of his, I think she's a deputy chief of staff. So the Boris Johnson's team now all out there.
Boris Johnson's
as we await
team
for the Prime Minister. I have to say though, Sophie, in terms of the appeal to get MPs out, there's not a massive group of MPs there, is there?
There isn't, certainly. I think we should go to have a look at some of the MPs who are gathered there. And as you say there, to be honest, if it is true, which it seems like it was, the number 10 have made the appeal for MPs to have made the MPs have a look at the MPs who've gathered. As I was just saying, number 10 made the appeal for the supportive MPs to come to the street to show their support for Boris Johnson. That is not a great number of MPs who have actually answered that call.
It's not a great number of MPs. He can't even get his MPs out.
Heather Wheeler, Peter Bone, Daniel Korinsky, but clearly that is not a huge number of MPs, and perhaps suggesting there that even though the MPs have answered Boris Johnson's call, and he has managed to refill his cabinet.
The audio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He can count. Woohoo! Wow, we're in luck. Get BBC did.
I mean, for a Prime Minister that 2.5 years ago won a majority of 80, the most successful Conservative leader at the ballot box since Margaret Thatcher, totally crushing David Cameron at the ballot box, at least, and really that isn't a massive group of MPs here today, given how
we have, because we've got Horse Guards Parade and all the standards in place for the beating retreat and
the bitterness between this Prime Minister and his parliamentary party. I was saying yesterday in the Commons, it was visceral, it was vicious. It gets like that towards the end because for Boris Johnson, he was in the fight for his political life, and when you get to the end game like that, it gets nasty. And it really did deteriorate the atmosphere. And obviously a number of MPs have thought, no, I'm not going to come along and stand behind you. I think the MPs might be come and stand behind him. I guess he would like that as a show of strength, but let's see what they do.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, because if it is intended as a show of strength, which you have to assume it is, if you can only muster up about 30 MPs, you do have to wonder if that was perhaps the show of strength that was intended. Yeah. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Johnny Mercer, we can now see coming out of the
Jolly on. If you move back, I'm sorry, the poor cameraman. If you move back, I'm sorry, the poor cameraman. We're trying to show you. Sorry, let me talk to you about it. We're trying to show you. Sorry, let me talk to you about it.
Jake, now, sorry,
Jacob Rees-Mogg, sorry, but there was there he is. You can see he's come out of number 11. Let's see if he'll give us away. No, he's not.
From the lectern,
and Johnny Mercer
hopefully this is audible.
and that's Chris Heaton-Harris. He is the chief whip, and that's Nigel
through the
Adams,
speakers as well as the distribution.
And here is Carrie Johnson and the baby, Romy, her 9-month-old They just came on the trip to Choggin with us, actually. It was lovely. I got a little sight of that lovely baby. There is Carrie Johnson, and next to her, Nadine Dorries, the Prime Minister's closest ally. And look, there's the little baby. And I don't know where Wilf is. They've got a toddler as well.
I mean, to be honest, it's probably
for
quite
some
risky
reason,
having
the
a toddler out on the downs.
Well, the toddler did
Quite
not come on the
uncontrollable.
trip, which, as anyone knows who takes a toddler
Don't know why
on a
it's
plane,
stuttering and stammering.
Yeah,
So look, there we have it. Chris Heaton-Harris, there's Carrie. There's giving us a little wave. She looks actually lovely, doesn't she, in that red dress? And the little baby, Ronnie, there she is. She's a sweet little baby. She's only 9 months old. And Nadine Dorries. And we are waiting for the Prime Minister. The door is opening. Here he comes.
Here he
Let's
comes.
listen in.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us
Back in 2
2019,
seconds, folks. I'm going to
many
see if
of
I
them
can
voting
sort this fucking
Conservative
shit
for
out.
the first time.
Right, let's see if this is any better. Fucking shitty computer. There we go, that should be a bit better. It's looking better to me. Woo! Yo. Aye. There we go, back in the game. Didn't miss a thing.
Thank you. 2019, many to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time. Thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019. And of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And let me say now to the people of Ukraine that I know that we in the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes. And at the same time, in this country, we've been pushing forward a vast program of investment in infrastructure and skills and technology, the biggest in a century, because if I have one insight into human beings, it is that genius and talent and enthusiasm and imagination are evenly distributed throughout the population, but opportunity is not. And that's why we must keep levelling up, keep unleashing the potential of every part of the United Kingdom. And if we can do that in this country, we will be the most prosperous in Europe. And in the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much, and when we have such a vast mandate, and when we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls, even in mid-term after quite a few months of pretty relentless sledging, and when the economic scene is so difficult domestically and internationally. And I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services. And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support as I can. And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks. I want to
Them's the breaks.
and my children and all members of my family who have had to put up with so much for so long. I want to thank the peerless British civil service for all the help and support.
I don't know if you can hear that in the audio, but there's somebody
services and of course
shouting in the
our
background some
fantastic
shit.
NHS who at critical moment helped to extend my own period in office, as well as our armed services and our agencies that are so admired around the world, and our indefatigable Conservative Party members and supporters whose selfless campaigning makes our democracy possible. I want to thank the wonderful staff here at Chequers, here at Number 10, and of course at Chequers, and our fantastic prop force detectives, the one group, by the way, who never leak. Above all, I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on. Being Prime Minister is an education in itself. I've travelled to every part of the United Kingdom, and in addition to the beauty of our natural world, I found so many people possessed of such boundless British originality and so willing to tackle old problems in new ways that I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden.
Remember, guys and girls,
Thank you
if
all
you
very much.
appreciate the streams,
Thank you.
stick a wee thumbs up. Nope, there's Bobo finished.
Boris Johnson there talking about how sad he is to give up the best job in the world, but them's the breaks.
Them's the
Thank you
breaks.
for an incredible mandate, he said, to the people who gave him the mandate after that 2019 general election victory. But the Darwinian system, he said, will now produce a new leader.
The Darwinian system, survival of the fittest.
Well, it was kind of trademark, but it was vintage Boris Johnson, wasn't it? It was, as I thought it would be. He was talking about his greatest hits. It had humour in there. It was tinged with sadness. And it was also very dignified, actually. A very dignified speech, I thought, in which he held his head high. He accepted that he didn't want to leave. And he gave... Well, one thing about Boris Johnson is he doesn't really give you much emotion. But there,
dignified.
What he does is he uses language to show the emotion. And
Top
some
radio
of the things
behind
that,
it.
you know, struck me. He said, of
Behind
course,
the game.
it was painful not to be able to see through the project. And as I said before, he rolled out the greatest hits. He said how proud he was to have got Brexit done. He said, and to give the country back the power to make its own laws. That's how he put it. He talked about levelling up. We must keep on levelling up, and we must fight for the freedom.
Them's the
of
breaks,
Ukraine for as long
y'all.
as it takes. He then went on to say, of course, it is painful not to see the projects through that I wanted to. And then he said, in a characteristically humorous way, he said, but the
Cup of
herd
tea.
has moved, and when the herd moves, it moves quickly. And then he said, no one is remotely indispensable. He'd said how much he wanted to stay on, and then he said that the Darwinian system, as he put it, will produce another leader who he said he would give as much support as he could. And then he touched upon his divisiveness, because he's batted it off all the time, but he said, I know that some of you, many of you, he said,
them's the bricks,
and
y'all.
some disappointed by my resignation, and he said he was so sad to be leaving the best job in the world, as he described it. And then he finished off by thanking the public for giving him, as he said, the immense privilege of being able to serve as the Prime Minister. He said being Prime Minister is an education in itself. And he said about the boundless British energy and enthusiasm that he had met around the country. And then he finally ended with, you know, he is a journalist, he's a good writer, and he does good oratory. He said, it might feel dark now, but the future together is golden. And with that, the applause, there were no tears, massive applause. And he went back, and he also thanked his wife, Carrie Johnson, who was watching on with their 9-month-old baby, Romney.
Yeah, it was, I thought, Beth, it was interesting talking beforehand about the emotion of other resignation statements we've seen. And in recent days, we've been told that Boris Johnson is in buoyant spirits. And you know, there were no tears, obviously, from the Prime Minister, but I did get the sense we got a flicker of emotion from him, perhaps more than he usually shows, when he was talking about how sad he was to give up the best job in the world, as she was saying, talking quite frankly about the reason that he's continued to fight on so long, perhaps a little bit of an acknowledgement that he has been trying to hang on to the job.
Fair split on the poll. Will Labour come to power in the next general election?
That huge mandate, he wanted it to be known that he was a winner once. And he
I don't know, to be
majority
quite
since
frank.
Margaret
But it depends what happens with the Conservative Party right now, isn't it? Whether they start eating each other. Whether Jacob Rees-Mogg, or whatever his name is, becomes the next leader.
But he said, as he acknowledged, the herd moved against him. And once that happened, there really was nowhere else for him to go. But, you know, I didn't expect to see Boris Johnson shed a tear. The most emotion I've ever seen in Boris Johnson is him sometimes drops his head. But he
apart from that, he's just laughing in everybody's face.
He projected confidence and optimism. They are the tickets, if you like, that attracted the public to him in the first place. The can-do optimism, the Boris Johnson boosterism, as we used to call it. And really that speech, I think,
there's some more votes in the nose have it. In the poll.
Also, look, it's hard to hear any Prime Minister talk about having to leave that job. It was hard to hear David Cameron do it, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, because, you know, as he said, it's the best job in the world. I'm sad to leave it. I didn't want to go, but I had to leave, and that must be.
The country is rudderless, directionless, leaderless.
You know, he was very composed.
Our Prime Minister's a fucking walking.
I felt that was vintage.
He's a dead man walking.
Gave us, his best
God knows how he's going to hold any authority when he's a dead man walking that he don't.
They are literally packing up at our feet.
I think, we are being packed up.
I mean, this is the brutality of politics. I think, you know, he comes out there for the big moment.
The brutality of politics. They're setting up fucking the sound bit.
They're the guys. So all the cables were running along here, and now it's all been packed up.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for your analysis, Beth Rigby there, political editor. Well, that is it. We hear, of course, the speech from Boris Johnson, the resignation speech, where he spoke about he ran through his greatest hits, that, of course, a big majority, but also expressed his frustration in not being able to really follow through on some of the mandate that he was given in terms of big policies. We can bring in Adam Bolton now, the former Sky News political editor and presenter, to discuss a bit.
Remember, folks will be live from the streets of Glasgow later on.
tinge of
Wait,
regret
an old friend
in the Boris
handing out
Johnson
his
speech,
newspaper,
saying
The Light,
we
I
must
think he
keep
calls
levelling
it.
up, that it was frustrating not to be able to continue in the work
Should be
that
some
he started.
interesting
And it really has been a
folks.
premiership marked by outside events, COVID, the war in Ukraine. Do you think that will be something that Boris Johnson, I guess, will regret?
I'm assuming they're going to be...
Well, I'll leave aside the emotion if
Nah,
I may.
I'm
The
not
fact
going to
is
assume
this
it
is a
because I don't know
massive,
fuck all.
political
I was going to say I'm assuming they're going to
humiliation
be
for Boris
SNP supporters.
who won a
or indie
great
supporters,
general
as
election
they're
victory,
called,
or led his party to a
which would
great
be
general
interesting.
election victory, but as he admitted, lost the confidence of his own party.
Look at that guy, man. He looks like
of 2 years since that general election.
Do you know who he looks like? Does anybody
what's
remember
more
the
important
Teenage
really is
Mutant
trying to
Ninja
work out
Turtles
what's gonna
cartoon?
happen now.
He looks
Boris
like
Johnson,
Krang. I think it was
he didn't
Krang,
actually
the
use
brain
the words, "I
that was in
resign,"
a
but
robot's
he's clearly on
stomach.
the way out.
His face
And
looks
let's look
like
at his
that.
words. He said, I have today
Fat
appointed a
fucking
cabinet to
squeezed in.
serve as I will until a new leader is in place.
You always know
And
somebody's
he
living
also
high in
said
the
that
hog when they
parliamentary
wear a shirt
party,
and
the
tie and their
1922
necks
committee,
bills over
will
their
announce a
fucking
timetable next
their
week.
collar.
Now, that
They've
holds
pure
open the
forced themselves
possibility
in.
that if they
I
go
can't
through the
find a
full
fucking.
leadership
I
election
can't. My neck
process of
isn't
MPs
fat.
choosing two candidates and then those candidates being voted on by the Conservative Party, that he could actually have quite a long caretaker period as he sees it. Of course, the alternative, and maybe he's put the ball back into the parliamentary party, is that the MPs here, come up with one candidate who would effectively take over before the end of the month. Now, we saw this before
Method,
with
Jeffrey,
the transition to Theresa
in the
May
afternoon,
and in
gents.
opposition to Michael Howard. Now, if that happens, then we could have a very, very short transition period for both Mr Johnson and this cabinet. But again,
Sturgeon's trying to, like all politicians, capitalise in chaos.
Yeah, I mean,
it's disgusting what she's doing. She's using the country burning as an opportunity to push for independence. When everybody's head is spinning, nobody knows what way is up.
There will be disputes about whether Brexit has indeed been done.
Craziness.
And there will also be disagreements as to whether in other areas of policy Mr Johnson has achieved very much at all. But the fact of the matter is, he is now out.
Folk touch base with this channel certainly don't want Labour coming into power anyway. But what clown are we going to get, man? This is going to be very strange.
As
very,
Enoch
very
Powell,
strange.
Famously said, all political careers end in failure.
Or they certainly do, don't they, Adam? Adam, thank you very much for guiding us through some of
and
the
after
likely consequences.
the leadership
Johnson has set out a timetable
election
for resigning as the leader.
Are we going to need a general
Party
election?
And also as Prime Minister. I guess the question, of course, many are asking
Is it going to
whether
be...
or not he can continue until the autumn. We've seen Liz Truss on Twitter in the last few moments saying the Prime Minister's made the right decision. The government under Boris's leadership had many achievements, delivering Brexit, vaccines and backing Ukraine. We need calmness and unity
backing
now,
Ukraine.
and to keep
Woohoo! We
governing,
sent
that
lots of
political bit
fucking guns,
while a
bombs
new
and
leader
bullets
is
into a
found.
war zone.
Meanwhile, another
Woohoo!
MP texted me
Yeah,
saying he's
baby!
just tried to gaslight the party
Thousands of miles away,
So I think
in a
that
country
certainly
that fucking a lot of people
sense
couldn't
the
even
range
fucking point to in a
reactions
fucking
of
map.
MPs
Never mind
to
tell
that
you
speech
even
by
any of their
Boris Johnson
history or anything
and
like that.
potential difficulties, I guess, in uniting the party even in the months ahead. Well, let's bring in our deputy political editor now.
It's not the first time that area of the world's been
Sam,
fought
we've been
over.
talking to MPs. What's the reaction?
That's right, Sophie.
Crimea.
So yes, a very striking, very important moment.
Very
Constitutional
strategically
moment. Boris Johnson
important.
signals that he will stand down, but only when there is a new Conservative Party leader to take over from him. An interim cabinet, as it were, will steward the country up until that point. What do MPs make of it? Will that position hold? Well, let's get the first reaction from a Tory MP. I'm joined by Jonathan Gullis, who called...
Watch some of the fallout, I reckon, eh? Oh, fuck. I need to find where they...
This is a man who understood.
I done my
where
Georgia
Stoke-on-Trent, North
Guidestones
Coast
as a
was.
Premier.
It's where
I need
he's
to
invested,
find
it's
out
where he's made sure that he
where
delivered on
you
that
get the option
Brexit,
to lower the countdown,
delay
because
that's
that
been happening.
countdown's a pain in the
So
ass.
it was difficult to see,
I
but I
think.
sadly came to the conclusion,
And
as
the
you say, a
music
number of days
sucks.
ago, that this simply was
You can choose
untenable,
different
and
ones and that.
it's
Can't
painful to
remember
watch, but
really.
it's the right thing that he's gone.
He called it eccentric for the party to kick him out. There wasn't much thanks from him to the Conservative Party for what they've done. Was there any twinge of guilt, any twinge of regret when you watched that speech?
When I made that decision to resign as a parliamentary private secretary, which I appreciate is at the very bottom of the ladder in terms of ministerial roles, I knew that once I made that decision, that it was the right decision. I haven't regretted it once. I'm just sad that it came to this, because I think he is, as I say, a good person instinctively, and I think that he could have been and should have been a great Prime Minister, but sadly, just some poor choices over too long a time. They just meant that his position was untenable.
There is a very big live argument going on at the moment about whether or not Boris Johnson should be allowed to continue under the timetable that he wants, which is possibly some weeks, if not months, until the next Conservative Party leader and hence Prime Minister is chosen. Now, that could be September or October. Do you think Boris Johnson should stay in Downing Street until then?
My personal preference would have been, because of especially the last 24 hours and the scenes that we've seen since then.
So after I wrap this up, I'm going to hit the gym again and hopefully go and catch up with this dude. Orion's his name at 5 o'clock-ish.
I trust Sir Graham Brady to act on
They're doing it 4 to 7.
I trust the interim cabinet. There are very good people like Robert Buckland, who I don't believe would have gone in there had they not known that they feel that they would be making sure that there were firm checks and balances on Boris whilst he continues, obviously, as you say, until we elect a new leader. So if that's what the senior members of the party have felt that they can live with, and the government
on the mainstream media
continue to deliver, especially
getting
for the
the
people
Bobo Johnson speech out.
I can live with that.
Do you think that's the settle with?
Started early, head of the game. Head of the
game. Do you think colleagues will accept that timetable? Or, as you say, given the events of the last 36, 48 hours, do you think that there will continue to be a debate on that matter?
There probably will be a small debate on that matter, but I think
Back
we
in
have
the
to
fucking
just
game.
bring a closure. We don't need to keep having rows internally. We now
Back
need to
in the
focus on
fucking
making
game.
sure that we get a timetable in place to elect a new
Swear to
leader.
God, man, I'm
Get
honestly
us
just
sorted
getting
as
my head
possible
out my
with their
fucking
cabinet, and that we then
lockdown
get,
asshole,
most
by the way, I'm no
back on top
joking.
of delivering for the people and focusing on the big issues today.
Fucking hell, I didn't even realise what an effect it had on me, to be quite
Do you think there
honest.
should be limits on what the
The
government over the
fucking
next few weeks
bad habits I just fell into.
should be able to do?
Lazy
Can Boris
bastards
Johnson make some
right
of the
up the
decisions he
fucking
would have made
nines,
anyway?
man.
Or should he just try and run as steady, a low profile, as unambitious
Time to
a
get
ship
head
as
out my
possible?
ass, man.
Those will be matters for the next Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister, as he still is, Boris Johnson, was elected on a Conservative manifesto. We should be delivering that manifesto. So anything within that, absolutely, we should be focusing on. And also, internationally, we can't suddenly stop helping our friends in Ukraine. The Northern Ireland Protocol is something that clearly needs solving, and that Boris and the Cabinet agreed to. So with issues
I
like
love
that,
the way that
absolutely
everybody's
bring help
just
from
all
Netherlands.
in
There is a
Ukraine
debate
for
in the
some
about
weird
whether or not to push
reason.
the button on a
You
packet
know,
of tax
it's
cuts,
like
changing economic direction. Are those the kind of
the
decisions you want to
BBC,
see with Boris
stopped
Johnson still in
reporting
charge?
on it because the
I
fucking
trust
Russians
that
are
the
winning.
Cabinet, as it now is, will come round the table, look at the situation. We have a
But
global
here's my
crisis when it comes
theory.
to
I don't
inflation.
think
We're seeing energy bills
Britain
rising.
actually
Constituents in my
wants
area are
Russia
clearly worried,
to win
particularly
or
about
lose,
October.
or Ukraine
If
to
it
win or
looks
lose.
like
They
we
want
need
a
to take
quagmire.
action sooner rather than later.
See all
then
these
it's likely
guns,
supportive
bombs
of
and
any
bullets
action
and
needs to be
shit,
taken
and
to
like
protect
whoever gets the
households with their
rebuilding
incomes, but
contracts and
also
stuff,
with the
man,
rising cost of
that
food
country's
and
going to be
What if there are
in
big
debt for
issues
a
like the Northern Ireland
very
Protocol that
long
could be up for
time.
debate in the leadership contest? Do you think that the party should just
And all the
press on with
Ukrainians
that
are
bill
loving it because they
despite the
don't like
international
fucking
ire, difficult
Putler?
conversations, Europe not really responding because they see a change of leadership in Britain on the way? How can you deal with those kind of situations with a caretaker Prime Minister maybe for 2 months?
Well, the Northern Ireland Protocol, if I remember correctly, Sam, you may correct me, didn't have any.
Is that bombed out Ukraine? Oh no, no, it's the Parliament
There was a
shit.
large amount of
Sorry.
support for it, and therefore I feel that the Prime Minister and their cabinet have a mandate from the Conservative Party backbenches to
Is
crack
this
on
where
with
I'm
those
getting
issues.
that audio for you?
Thank you very much
Thank you
indeed.
very much.
Clearly,
Why are they just
difficult
showing
day
you
for Tory MPs, but
helicopter
there
of
no
fucking
regrets
waste monster?
whatsoever from one person who has called for Boris Johnson, to stand down.
Oh, is this dude up and running yet?
Really
Right,
interesting
let's...
stuff there. Sam,
Breaking!
certainly,
Slam the brake.
Okay, now he's complaining about, I think it's the Daily Mail he's talking about there. He's complaining about the Daily Mail having an editorial stance
Now, as is self-evident, it isn't hard to see where the editorial stance is coming from. Excuse me. Now, what this guy fails to recognise or even like fucking acknowledge, his radio station has an editorial stance. He is coming from a particular place. But no.
Of this.
And again, this guy can't even recognise that Boris carried out the will of the people. In a democracy, the majority of idiots willing to vote wanted Brexit. And regardless of what you think's good, bad, ugly and indifferent, mate, democracy isn't dictated to, it isn't it isn't logic democracy, it's democracy. People vote the way they want. And people wanted out the European Union. And this guy clearly still can't handle it and accept the fact. And you need to wonder where people like that are politically. And if they do get into power, well, they keep asking the British people, like little Sturgeon, keep framing and Sturgeon's like they can frame the question. They can manipulate the vote, and the Sturgeon's already trying to do it with the independent vote, and I will tell you why. This is very simple sales logic, right? People prefer to say yes than no, right? How often when you're sitting listening to somebody ramble or something, you're just like, aye, just saying yes for the sake of saying yes. You're not really, couldn't give a fuck either way. You're like, oh, can't even be fucking arguing. Aye. Right? Now you learn this in sales training. People prefer to say yes. So you ask the questions where the answer's yes, because they're more likely to say yes. If that makes any sense, it's logic. So basically, what Sturgeon has got, Sturgeon is, should Scotland become independent? Yes or no? People are more likely to say yes than no. People prefer to say yes. Yes is nice. Woohoo! Yes! Woohoo! Yes! No! Bad! Ooh! You know? So rather than should Scotland remain in the United Kingdom? That's what I would ask. Right? She won't ask that question because she's framing it to suit the fucking independent people. The people who watched too much Braveheart when they were younger. Loved the old Mel Gibson. Zico! Mel Gibson! Can you imagine? The SNP, Nazi supporting SNP. It's logical. Stick it into your Googles. The Scotsman, you'll get a lovely little article. MI5. Anyway, and so you've got the Nazi SNP using a film by Mel Gibson. Some would say he would look good in a Hitler outfit, wouldn't they? Are you surprised? Freedom! Fucking hate the English. Absolutely. I mean, I love to poke fun at the English. And there's a friendly rivalry. And last time I was down in England, granted, right, I wasn't in a big metropolis, like Manchester or something, or like Glasgow or something, you know, where you're used to seeing fucking every nationality under the rainbow. And it's all good in the hood and everybody's happy and all that. I was in a wee
a wee small town outside the Blackburn. And Blackburn isn't that big a place. And oh my god, the fucking welcome I got. Oh man. Man, oh man. They all just wanted to fight with the Scotsman. It's like, fucking hell, man. Come down here and fucking try to give a good impression of Glaswegians and shit, and all you fucking cunts want to do is fight. I don't fight, I just pick up things and hit cunts with it. That's what I say to one of them. Anyway, it was crazy, man. Little England, indeed. Whew. Granted, I was down in the boozer watching the Scotland-Ukraine game. That went down like a ton of bricks. There was no friendly banter or anything. They all just fucking hated me. They all wanted Scotland to get an absolute doing. And I'm sitting there with my fucking Union Jack t-shirt. It was a fucking... What an experience, man. What an experience. But fucking hell, man. Don't holiday in Little England. It's no worth it if you're no a Little Englander, man. It's not worth it, man. Anywho, let's get back to this dude.
That's why we must keep levelling up, keep unleashing the potential of every part
levelling up
of the United Kingdom.
Yes, I like that computer game.
If we can do that in this country, we will be the most prosperous in Europe. And in the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much.
Trying to get the top of the hour.
Nadeem Zahawi was finished for standing on this James Doddridge. Are you
Why
disappointed
did they not show
to
this fucking thing?
Didn't he, yesterday?
Must have been a rough. It's a rough day for him. James Doddridge is the Prime Minister's ministerial aide, so he's the guy that is the eyes and ears for the Prime Minister in the Commons, and he must have had a really tough 24 hours. But yeah, going back to MPs, I mean, different people took different decisions. So Liz Truss.
Let's have a wee bit of the BBC. It's enough of that douchebag. Enough of that.
From Boris Johnson and his staff. Turning up for work.
Get a wee summary.
Says he wants to stay on as Prime Minister until the autumn while a successor is chosen. The announcement came after more senior resignations and declarations of no confidence from MPs and others this morning.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
Now, this lunchtime, the Prime Minister has appointed a new cabinet, but Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has said that he must step down right away or Labour will try to bring a vote of no confidence in Parliament.
He needs to go completely. None of this nonsense about clinging on for a few months. He's inflicted lies, fraud and chaos in the country.
Sir Keir Starmer, we'll have all the latest reactions from here in Westminster and around the UK, as well as from our correspondents and indeed from some of the voters too. So stay with us.
Oh man, it cracks me up, man, that you've got a leader of the Labour Party that's Sir. That's the Workers' Party. At least fucking Corduroy Corbyn fucking wore a cardigan, you know what I mean? And like when he was in Parliament, you seen him with his needles knitting hemp and shit.
Very good afternoon from Westminster and from Downing Street, and welcome to BBC News at 1. So, Boris Johnson has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. He was saying last night that he would want to stay in office, but more cabinet level and other resignations piled on the pressure. And around 9 o'clock this morning, the BBC learned that he would be stepping down as leader, but not as Prime Minister, not yet anyway. He wants to stay in office until the autumn, until a successor has been chosen. Now, within the past half hour or so, the Prime Minister has made that formal statement here in Downing Street, outside the famous door of number 10. So before we get the latest on the reaction and talk to our political editor, Chris Mason, who will be joining us, let's hear what the Prime Minister said.
Monday to
In the last
Friday.
few days, I've tried to
1
persuade my
o'clock,
colleagues
sometimes
that it
earlier
would be
if there's shit
eccentric to
going
change governments
down.
when we're delivering so much,
Like a nice wee
and when we have such a
PMQs
vast mandate, and when
yesterday.
we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls,
Or
even in midterm
Bobo
after
with
quite a
his
few
tail
months of pretty
between his
relentless
legs today.
sledging, and when the economic scene
Sledging.
is so difficult domestically
Ooh.
and internationally. And I
Look,
regret
he's still laughing at
not
people.
to have been successful in those arguments,
The
and of course it's painful not to
Bullingdon,
be able to
Billingdon
see
Club, or
through
whatever him
so
and
many ideas
Cameron and all that
projects
were
myself.
members of.
But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services. And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support
I think
as
there's
I
somebody
can.
singing Bye Bye
And
Boris or
to
something
you,
in the
the
background.
British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who
Don't
will
know if
also
you
be
can hear that at
disappointed.
home.
And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
Them's the breaks.
So them's the
Is that
breaks,
not like
says
a
the Prime
fucking
Minister,
rap
speaking
song or
in
some
Downing Street,
shit, man?
A short while ago, the end game.
Them's
Boris
the
Johnson
breaks.
began really
Them's the
early this
breaks.
week,
Where's that from,
when
man?
The Health Secretary Sajid
Answers in the
Javid
postcard.
and, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak,
Or
as
in
they
the chat
then
room would be even
resigned their
better.
posts, and then that opened the floodgates. And since then, a succession of ministers and ministerial aides have withdrawn.
40 odd folk have resigned, man. Yesterday I was fucking saying 20 when it was 18.
Prime Minister just 2
And
days after
it's
being
like 43,
named
I
the new
think.
Chancellor, and the list of names there on the frame of those who've been
Oh
in the
man,
past,
oh
lots of
man,
them
oh man, oh
supportive,
man, oh man.
but who withdrew their support in the past few days. So let's catch up with the events of the morning.
It
And
was a
Jonathan
nice
Blake,
day,
our correspondent,
and now
has this
the
report.
fucking clouds are coming.
Downing Street often draws a crowd, but this morning, real drama was about to unfold. The Prime Minister clung on
Coronation
overnight
Street,
after Cabinet
EastEnders.
colleagues had told him his time was up. And first thing, there was silence from Boris Johnson and his staff. Turning up for work amid the turmoil, a last-ditch pledge of loyalty from one minister.
Reese Moggs or something.
The former Chancellor off somewhere in a hurry.
Are you going to make a bid for the leadership, sir?
Another senior minister staying
He
in
looks like
post,
Spock,
urging
doesn't he?
the Prime Minister
Get a touch
to
of the
go.
Spocks
The
about him.
facts are undeniable. He can't command the confidence of people, sufficient numbers of people to serve in his government. He can't engender the support of the parliamentary party. And that is why it is so regrettable for us today. It's incredibly sad for us to reach the conclusion that he sadly must stand down.
The resignations kept coming, including those only appointed 2 days ago. Education Secretary Michelle Donnellan said with great sadness she had to step down, and Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi telling Boris Johnson,
Fucking brilliant,
go now.
isn't it?
Then the
Fucking
news that Boris
magic.
Johnson had accepted his fate.
Just through from my colleague Chris Mason, our political editor.
Not the Scottish guy.
The expectation is now that Boris Johnson.
See, the
will
Scots
resign
are like
today.
the Jews in
Relief
America,
from his MPs
overrepresented
and a warning to go quickly.
in politics
What's
and
happened is
TV.
ministers have seen, well, they've referred to a lack of
As
honesty and
we
integrity,
rule
and
the
we clearly can't
world.
have that. And it's much better the PM goes now than
When
dragging on to
we
the
rule
privileges
the
committee,
world.
potentially finding that he'd knowingly misled the House.
People
because
think
that
I'm
would have been a
joking, but I'm
disaster
being
too.
perfectly serious.
In the Commons, questions from Conservatives about exactly what happens now.
I've got all the
Might it not be in
PMs.
everybody's interest
Blair,
to speed up the transition
Cameron,
as much as possibly can be?
It will not be tenable for him to continue as a caretaker if he cannot fill the ministerial appointments he needs to.
The governance of this country cannot be allowed to
Look
fail.
at where their names
Boris
are
Johnson's
from, where their
opponents
families
say
are
he
from.
can't continue in any form.
He needs to go completely. None of this nonsense about clinging on for a few months. He's inflicted lies, fraud and chaos.
Now remember, this represents the working man.
We're
Does this guy resonate with you?
in the middle of a cost of living.
As a normal dude and not a working man, does he resonate with you? What about this little Hitler? Lego haircut, what?
And utter farce.
Zeke Owl, the sturgeon.
When people in every part
You can't call her Hitler, or you'll get the super police force Scotland will investigate you.
Were made, he was filling the big gaps in government left by so many
even though her party
and then the
were investigated and were supporters of Hitler during World War II.
Of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham
Plus,
Brady, the
she's got a political dictatorship up here.
That the process of choosing that new leader
And she wants to go and
now.
take over the European Union.
Conservative voters, admitted nobody was indispensable, and ended with a message of hope.
I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Jonathan Blake,
Canel,
BBC News.
It was taps off earlier.
Jonathan there reporting on the events of the morning.
Fucking hoods up.
Prime Minister was speaking less than an hour ago, and Chris
But the
Mason,
weather's
our
been
political editor, is with me.
To
Let's
say
start with the
erratic
basics. He's resigning as leader,
is an
but not as Prime
understatement.
Minister.
I mean, like,
We got a
1
mix, I
second
think, listening to the Prime Minister
you
just a few
remember
minutes
it's
ago,
summertime,
personal,
and then
the
2
political,
seconds later it's
and the
raining again.
constitutional. So we heard, didn't we, his deep regret that he has been humiliated by his own party, a man who won a big majority on behalf of the Conservatives, gone within less than 3 years of that time of office. We've still got, though, the constitutional question that is being wrestled with.
Was it
which
Curtis Blow?
Is it right? Is it possible? Is it feasible?
It's definitely.
for him to continue
I
as
don't know
Prime
if I'm
Minister
wrong in thinking
until
it's
the
a
autumn?
rap song.
He was
I don't know.
making the
Maybe
argument
a
that it is, and
you
he's been
rap
assembling a
dudes
cabinet and more
sample
junior
fucking
ministers to
everything.
fill all of those gaps
They very
in his
rarely come up with their own
caused by the
fucking
resignations of
shit.
the
We just
last
sample
couple
it
of
and
days, and he wants to continue until the autumn.
Mumble
and a
over it.
timetable will be set out as he set out in the next few days as
In
to
the
how
afternoon,
the Conservative
Canal.
leadership race will run,
Thanks
which will
for tuning
determine
in.
who his successor is.
Remember,
But
folks,
you have people within
them's
his
the
own
breaks
party, you've been talking
and
to them
thumbs
this
up.
morning, others as well on the opposition benches,
Devin.
who say that that isn't tenable, that he has lost
Oh, man, you lucky
the
bastard.
confidence not just of his own party. but
Honestly,
say
man,
some of
like,
and Labour are talking about bringing about a moment.
I've
in the
found
House
a
of Commons
fucking
around
gym
a vote of confidence
that doesn't
in the
treat
government.
that
If the government
doesn't
loses
think
a
the
vote of
world's
confidence,
ending.
Let's say this explicitly: there is a general election.
Don't
And
even
that
get me
matters
started.
because that
There's still
might shift
gyms
the
up here
mindsets
that
of
fucking have
Conservative
got their
MPs who
saunas
don't
and steam
really
rooms
fancy a
closed
general
because of
election,
fucking
to think that
COVID.
were that moment to come about.
Anyway, but
they'd
there's
rather
other ones
put
that
up
I
with a
haven't
leader
eaten. I
that just
found a
swung out for
sauna.
another 3
And
months,
yesterday
then
I
elect
had
a
a
new leader
sauna
of
for
their
the first
choice,
time in about
then as
2
they might
years.
see it, run the risk of a general
Oh
election,
my
that
god,
can
I
see them out of
forgot how fucking good it
Won't they
was,
be
man.
swayed by what
Fucking
they've heard today?
immense.
They'll have opinions already on the Prime Minister, but
And
this
then I
statement,
realised how fucking
I'm just
Casper the
noticing on
Ghost.
social media,
like,
it's not gone down well with
right
some
now,
Tory
you can't
MPs
really
already.
tell because the camera,
One
the
saying, where's the
exposure and all that
humility?
kind of shit.
Another one saying he's blaming the
Although I
herd
do look
instinct.
like Casper the
Well,
fucking
why
Ghost.
not blame himself
But-
for what's gone on here? So it's interesting
I
to
think
what
fuck I
extent
take
that statement
vitamin D, that's
will
all
annoy
I'm
some of
saying,
them.
man, because
And so the crucial thing
habits
that we
I
need to
fell
watch
into
in the coming hours,
during
in the coming
lockdown,
days,
man.
is how does that statement go down amongst Conservative
Here's one for you,
MPs
right?
and more broadly within Parliament? To what extent has it
I
led
used
to
to go
boil
with
of the
my
anger
bike all
of
the
people
time.
in the Conservative Party who said, look, Boris Johnson
And
cannot continue
lockdown
into
happened,
the medium term as
and
Prime
as
Minister.
lockdown
He's now
happened,
said he's not going to
because
do
I would
that
still be
beyond
going
3
out on my
months.
bike
So
all
how
the
many does
time.
that persuade? We know it's persuaded some because some have come back
They
into
building a
government
man
from the
decided
backbenches. What
to
is the
renovate
mood
the
of the
lifts.
party as a result of what he has had to say?
So,
and then what are
in my
others
building, you've got an odd and
tempted
even
to do?
lift.
Boris Johnson will have hoped by saying
he's
what he's
getting
done
me.
today
So,
that he has grasped
the long and the
back
short
at least
of it, the
some
lift
control
on
of
that
events in the coming months. But only
landing
some,
was out
and we'll
of commission,
see just how much in
which
the
would
coming
have
days.
meant that I would
Indeed,
have
Chris,
had
thank you very
to
much. Again, we'll
hike
talk,
my bike up and
in a short
down
while again. Thanks very much.
stairs and
Chris
through
Mason there
fire
with his thoughts
doors.
as political editor.
And if you
Now,
don't
both
know
the
fire
Secretary of State
doors,
for
they
Wales and the Secretary of State for Northern
a
Ireland
big spring
had already
hinge
resigned
and
from the
swing
cabinet. Simon Hart, Brandon Lewis, and they were calling for the Prime Minister to go.
For
So
health and
they were very
safety
much
reasons.
part of this political equation. So
it
in a
pretty
moment
much
we'll be hearing
put
from
my
our
bike out of
correspondents
commission for
in
fucking
Belfast
like
and in Cardiff. But first, we're going to go to Glasgow and our correspondent.
It's meant to be 6-7 months initially.
We're going to you, James, because
the pandemic cut, and that turned into like fucking nearly a year and a half.
About the events here in Downing Street,
then,
saying that she was relieved that some
when
of the
I did
chaos
start going back out
has
my
come
bike,
to an end, but saying that she
my
didn't
tyres
expect
were fucking
policy to change at
my
all.
bike
Is that
hadn't
a
been
fair
moved
summary?
so long, with fucking tyres had fucking deflated.
Yes, I mean, I think it's fair to say, Hugh,
So
it's
I'm
no
getting
secret
back into that habit.
Boris Johnson has never been as popular in Scotland as he is in some
Get a
other
few
parts of the
recycles
country.
back up to the
and
old,
when Nicola Sturgeon said she thought
Loch
there would be
Lomond and
widespread
whatnot.
relief that he was going to go,
But if I do get a
I think
warm
perhaps
day,
she was reflecting what will be
you've got the
common, not a
incentive to
universal,
cycle
but
up
a
to the old
common
Loch
view
Lomond
in
and get a wee
Scotland.
swim.
But she did also say that she thought
in
it
the
would be
Loch.
an untenable
I
proposition.
was
I
getting
think
in
those
trouble
were
with
the
my
words
mum
that
for
she
saying
used.
Loch
For
Lomond.
Boris Johnson to carry on as caretaker Prime
You're meant to
Minister
spit
for
your
any
teeth out when you're saying
extended
it.
period of time, because that would mean that what she called the complete and utter farce of the last couple of days might continue. And perhaps what's interesting is that Douglas Ross, the leader of the Conservatives in Scotland, to some extent echoed that. He thought that Boris Johnson should not stay over an extended period, that some other figure should be put in place. But when you come to Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, so he's the representative really of the UK Cabinet in Scotland, he has been fiercely loyal to Boris Johnson, unlike the Secretaries of State in Northern Ireland and
You
Wales,
see in the background,
sticking
you know
with
the
him right
armadillo,
up to the end, describing
the
him as a
hydro.
friend and saying, you know, how sad he is that Boris Johnson is going, but it leaves open that question of what will happen with independence. Will a new Prime
pretty
Minister
much
take a
in
different view on
Finiston, just
Nicola
down the road from
Sturgeon's intention
Finiston,
to have a referendum
where I
next
was
year?
yesterday, the new West End, and for some reason it is like a pure.
Well, here in Northern
pure
Ireland,
spot
it's fair to say that the vast majority of politicians, be they unionist, nationalist or neither, held Boris Johnson in pretty low esteem. But what people are now asking is what the change in Downing Street will mean for the very future of devolution in this part of the UK. There hasn't been a fully functioning devolved government here at Stormont since February, when the Democratic Unionist Party in effect collapsed the power-sharing executive over the Brexit trading arrangements for Northern Ireland, known as the Northern Ireland Protocol. That was an arrangement agreed between Boris Johnson's government and the EU, which in effect creates a trade border between Northern Ireland and England, Scotland and Wales. So goods, when they arrive here from Great Britain, are checked to see if they are in line with EU standards. Unionists regard that as an internal trade border within the UK and therefore unacceptable.
The
now, the government's currently steering legislation through Parliament that would give ministers the power to, in effect, scrap large parts of that protocol. The question is, will a new Prime Minister take a more moderate line on the protocol? Critics of the legislation have argued that it breaks international law. Or would the new resident of Number 10 maintain Boris Johnson's position or even harden it? That could affect relations with Dublin, with other EU member states and with non-unionist parties here. On the other hand, a softer stance
world famous. That used to be used to put all the
to resurrect power sharing in the Assembly behind
steam
me. So one way or another, it doesn't feel as if the crisis in Westminster has made the crisis here at Stormont any easier to handle.
Well, here in Wales, it's
we
perhaps
might not have built the railways,
the resignation's
but
been
we
welcomed
fucking
by
built all
the
the
First Minister, Labour's Mark Drakeford.
trains
He said
that went on them back in
that
the
the
day.
UK needed a stable government, so this was the right thing to do. But
Among
it's also
others,
been welcomed
were used
by Welsh Conservatives, at least
to lift the big
willing
steam
to
trains onto
speak
ships
to
to
members
export
of
them
the press.
to
Now,
the
it's been a very
Empire!
fast turnover in, well, less than 24 hours.
When
the Welsh
we
Secretary,
ruled
Simon
the
Hart, was
world.
until late last night seen as a Boris Johnson loyalist, but he triggered a second wave of
Scotland rules
cabinet
the
resignations
world.
last night. He's already been replaced this morning by Robert Butland, someone who
What
was
game
sacked
they
by
all
Boris
the
Johnson
rich-
last year as Justice Secretary.
rich
Back in the cabinet
businessmen
now
go
as
and do
Welsh
business.
Secretary. Although he was born in Wales and worked in Wales as a
Golf.
lawyer, he's not a Welsh MP. Ordinarily,
'Cause
that
we
might ruffle some
rule the
feathers, but I
world.
think people maybe see him as a bit of a
And,
caretaker
well, he's
in
believe
that
this or not,
position. Leader
Scotland
of the Welsh Conservatives,
invented
Andrew R.T.
modern
Davies, again a
football.
big fan of Boris Johnson until very recently, has been praising his
If
legacy.
he's going to
Part of
actually
that legacy
check out your
was in the
history about the
2019
old
general
soccer,
election, winning seats like Wrexham,
it
like
used to be
Delhi,
known as like
like
rugby
Bridgend, taking them
football,
from
like
Labour's
rugby
hands. So
and
whoever
football
eventually takes over from Boris Johnson, the
branched
question
out
in
of
Wales
the
will
same
be,
game.
will they have the same
And
appeal? Can
football used to be
they
played
appeal
like
to
Harry
Welsh
Enfield. I don't know if he's ever
traditionally
remember.
Labour voters
Harry
whenever
Enfield
that
when they
next
used to
general
do the old
election,
football
because
games when it
that
was
will
like
be
they
the
kicked the
next
ball
question
and
taxing
like
Welsh Conservative
22
minds.
players ran towards it and then they kicked the ball. That's
Oh, well, many
honestly how
thanks, Howard
football
Griffith,
used to
there
get
for us,
played.
in
It
Cardiff,
never
and,
get played
Chris
as a
in
passing
Belfast,
game
and
with
James in Glasgow.
formations
Thank
and stuff
you,
like that
all of you.
until
Of course,
Queen's
attention
Park
will
Rangers,
now turn to the question of who will
the
succeed
inhabitants of
Boris
Hampden
Johnson
Park,
eventually
back
as
in the
Prime
day, not the
Minister.
current Hampden
Let's
Park,
talk a
the
bit
old
about
Hampden
the
Park.
process. The process of selection for the Conservative leader effectively starts
Worked
now,
within the
and
rules of the
timetable will
game
be decided
and started
by
the modern
leadership of
passing
the
game as we all know it
1922
today.
committee. That's the committee of backbench Conservative MPs.
Don't know if
They're
you're
in charge of this
interested in your
process.
football
And the
history.
rules as they stand
And
today, they could change, is
go and
that
check
any
the people
candidate
that
needs the
started up
support
the Football
of 8
Association, the
Conservative
English
MPs to
one,
take
which
part
was
to be
set up in the
nominated.
Free
And then
Masonic
there follows
Tavern,
a
by the way, in
series
the
of
city of
votes to leave
London.
just 2 candidates left in the race.
It
and
was
then
all
it's a
fucking the
kind of
military
head-to-head.
industrial complex
And
and all the
Conservative Party right across,
aristocracy
the UK,
and
not just
the
MPs,
ruling
will
elite that set
decide
it up.
who gets
And
to
the
be,
reason they set up,
the Conservative
started
leader, and
setting
then, of
up
course, to
and
succeed
organising
Boris Johnson
professional
as Prime
sports
Minister
is because over in the
whenever that
continent,
is. So
all
let's
the
talk a little
commoners
bit about that
were
process
running
and
around chopping
what it
everyone's
could mean
heads
with
off.
Nick Eardley, our political correspondent.
And they didn't want it to happen in
Nick,
Britain, so they gave us
that's it on paper,
sport.
okay? There's the remaining question about whether Boris Johnson is
Anyway.
able to stay in there as Prime Minister for the next 3 months or so.
All
That
right, Mick
argument
Vicar,
is
how you
already
doing, my man?
raging. When MP said earlier that the process for selecting a new leader can be truncated,
Hopefully
it can be
you're well, mate.
rushed
I need
up,
to get a call, mate.
is all of that
I feel like
possible
I haven't
if the
spoke to you in
1922
fucking
committee
ages.
decides it wants that?
It's all possible,
been
but
keeping myself
I'm being
busy,
told that the most
deliberately.
likely thing is if there is a full election, that a new
Instead
leader
of
won't be in
fucking
place until
pandemic
September.
Netflix
now,
stop.
There is a considerable body of the Conservative Party wants Boris Johnson out right away. I've spoken to lots of them this afternoon. They're going to try and find ways to do that. My understanding is, as the process stands just now,
that's why I got a touch of the cold.
Monday there will be a
my
meeting to
immune
agree
system was that of a
rules
fucking
to decide this
scarecrow's.
leadership election and the timetable. That process could begin.
Shouldn't be
almost
actually,
immediately
man.
with
I'm
nominations from
fucking
MPs. The list would be whittled down
vitamined
to
up to the
before summer
nines, and I
holidays
do
in a couple of
eat
weeks. It would then
relatively
be, if
healthy
there are 2
at
candidates
times.
left and they both want to go out to hustings around the country, that process would then take place over the summer holidays.
I make the best
expectation
fucking
at the top of the Tory party is that there would be a new leader then in place by the return of MPs in September.
If you want, you can stick
It's
a wee
not
bit
clear
of
if that's
meatballs
what's
in
going to
there.
happen though, Hugh.
And it's
because
easy,
I do
easy,
think
easy,
that
easy,
there's a lot of
easy,
bad blood
easy.
towards the
Tons
Prime
of
Minister.
garlic,
There are some MPs
as much
who
as you
watched
can
that
handle.
speech and weren't particularly happy with some of the language.
Shallow
the
fry
Prime
it
Minister
at a
used
low
about
heat so the
the
garlic
herd
doesn't burn, because you don't want it to burn.
They
It goes
may
bitter. You
decide
just want
to move
the
quicker
garlic to
over the next
flavour
couple
all
of
the
weeks.
oil. Good
If I
glug of
was to
oil.
put you on the spot and say, OK, name 3 or 4 people
then
who are the
what I do is I get
current
2
kind of
punnets of
favourites, if you
cherry
can, this opinion,
tomatoes. I get
different
the
bits of
Tesco
the
famous
parliamentary
ones.
party to start with.
But you can
Leave
use
alone
any
the party
fucking
out
tomatoes,
there
but I use
in
the cherry
wider
tomatoes
world.
because they're sweeter.
What kind of names did you come up with?
Sweeter.
I think the list will be long.
Stick them
when
in
it
the
comes,
pan,
But the names that are
and
standing
that's
out
it.
from the conversations I've had so far today are Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary,
Not too high a heat.
Rishi Sunak, Chancellor,
And fucking
until a
cook them
couple of days ago.
motherfuckers down to it's a
Penny Mordaunt,
lovely
still
tomato
a Trade
sauce.
Minister, didn't actually resign.
And we'll have
in
a
the
few
end.
skins and all
the
that
one
in
other
there,
name
man,
just
but
have at the back of your
grow
mind
up.
is Liz
You
Truss.
can always
the
put
Foreign
it through a
Secretary.
sieve and
I
all
think it could
that
be
if you
lot
fucking
bigger
can't
than that,
handle
Hugh,
a
if
wee
we were
bit
here
of
for longer.
texture.
I
But I
could
love
keep
the
going, but
texture, I
that's the
love all
top
the
4
wee
just
That's
chunks
enough
of
to be getting on with.
garlic
Thanks,
and
Nick.
all
Thanks
that.
very much. Nick Eardley there, our political correspondent with some
Boil
thoughts
it
on,
right down.
the process of electing.
And this
of
is like
course, some of the
proper
names that have
Italian
been merged.
spaghetti. It's no like
only
fucking
last night, the Prime Minister was
spaghetti
saying
bolognese
that,
where you get a ton
he
of
had
fucking
this
dry
personal
spaghetti and
mandate, as he
boom,
called it,
10
to
ton of sauce
remain
on
in
it.
power. Well, that's
And
what
then
his
you cook your
supporters were saying.
spaghetti
So
and
what
put
do
it
the
through the
voters
sauce and just
who
coat
gave
all the
Boris
spaghetti.
Johnson an
It
election
doesn't
victory
even
less
look
than
like
3
there's
years ago,
anything on it.
make of
Well,
the
it's a wee
news
bit
today
reddish
from Downing Street
because
that
the
the Prime
sauce
Minister
is so
has decided
sweet
to
and
resign as
concentrated
Conservative
and
leader and
beautiful.
eventually as Prime Minister.
Oh, just
we're going to go to Don
best
Valley,
spaghetti
that's in
ever.
South Yorkshire. That's one of the
And then obviously if
constituencies
you want
won
to
by the
fry up some
Conservatives in
meatballs or
2019,
whatnot
having
and
been
rattle
held
them
by
in there.
Labour for almost
Put whatever
100
you want
years. So
in
these
there.
are precisely the
Oh,
seats
it's making me
where that
fucking
Boris
hungry.
factor was seen to be rather important. Our correspondent Danny Savage has been talking to voters there today.
In this Conservative-held seat in South
See,
Yorkshire
golf,
today, they were
told you.
getting used
All the
to
people
the
that
idea
rule- all the
of
people
Boris
that
Johnson leaving office.
play
That
golf.
didn't necessarily mean they were happy about it, though.
We've got nothing really to replace him with.
Donald Trump.
Golf. I'm so sorry to see him go.
Oh my God!
You were a supporter of Boris Johnson?
I was a supporter of him, yeah. I think he's done a lot for
He's
us.
got a
What do
great
you think the
dentist.
alternative is?
Well, the Labour Party is going to, and SNP and Liberals, and it just makes you shudder
Fuck Drew.
when you think about it.
The majority of people conceded the game was up, and Boris Johnson has missed the mark for a while.
I think it's about
I
time,
don't know,
really.
man. I think I'm a
obviously
wee
with what's
bit
happened,
overexposed.
He's pushed things too far and he had to go in the end. He's been very untrustworthy, so he had no other option, I don't think.
This is an area which has a Conservative
bit
MP
better,
at the
isn't it?
moment. Do you think if there was a general election today, it would return a Conservative MP again?
I doubt it, to be perfectly honest. I think Labour would probably get in now.
Nearby, on the canal boats,
Ooh, answer the
Conservatives
poll.
over
Let's
Brexit,
know.
but they lost
Let's see
him
what
over Partygate.
My mum was in a nursing home, still is in a nursing home, and I've lost.
Well, the hope fucking not
wasn't a
has
good
it.
visitor.
So
I'm on board as well. I don't know, man. If Labour had a decent fucking leader that was saying decent shit, but no stammer.
In the centre of Thorn, they were talking about the latest developments over coffee. More dismayed Conservative supporters.
I'm concerned who's going to follow, who's going to do the job.
Scotland's new world order.
We live in a small village.
Mate, we just fucking.
Nothing gets done.
And this is a Conservative constituency.
It all goes back to Robert the Bruce and
like
fucking
Conservative support
our
is
proddy
waning in
roots
this
up here,
marginal
man.
seat. Whoever takes over needs a big swing back
And,
in their favour if they are to
'cause,
hold on. Danny Savage, BBC News.
down in England,
in the Don Valley.
the Queen's the head of the church. Up
So
here,
Danny there taking
she ain't the
temperature
head of the
in
Scottish
Don Valley,
church.
that
The
constituency,
Scottish church
which
were
was,
such
one
Puritans
of
back in the day.
Red
They
Walls,
didn't
it's
allow the
called.
Queen to
Those
become
former
the head
Labour
of the
seats which
church.
went Conservative last time, and of
Don't
course
know if you know
the
that.
Prime Minister's victory back in
facts
2019
matter.
would not have been possible without support from
These
other
facts
kinds of
matter.
areas, what we call the true
We'll
blue,
start
the
up a group
traditional blue Tory
called
heartlands.
Facts Matter.
If we look towards the south of England, we look to places
And
like
if you go and look
Chichester,
at,
as one of those examples, very different seat to Don Valley. Voters there picked a Conservative
what was
MP in every
happening
election
in the
since
royal family
1924.
and the royal
And most
families
recently,
of Scotland
Gillian
and
Keane won the seat
England back in the day after the
Our
Reformation,
correspondent
when there
Duncan
was the
Kennedy
Counter-Reformation with the
has been gauging the mood of
Jesuits and all
voters
that,
in
which
that
the
part
Pope
of
is a Jesuit.
Thank God
And
something's
again,
happening
facts
and he's gone.
matter.
He's resigned.
Oh
no.
In Chichester, Boris Johnson's resignation has brought jubilation and consternation. It's one of the Conservatives' safest seats, but today even some of his supporters are clear. This political affair is over.
Your verdict?
Well, I never wanted him in the first place because I thought he was always economical with the truth. I think and it has proved to be the case, hasn't it? What's your view?
Leeds
It's time to go, really, isn't it? He tried to hang on, but yeah, not much to say. Really. Has
Alan,
to be done.
Boris is never greeting, mate. He was doing what he always does, laughing in people's faces as he delivers
Melanie
fucking a
Lucas runs a
speech
bistro cafe
that him and his
is
mates
finding the cost of
fucking
living crisis is affecting her business.
wrote up,
She's
pissing
always
and
voted
laughing at the
Conservative
fucking
and has been a
plebs.
supporter of the Prime Minister.
Oh, this will make them laugh.
I think it's a great shame. I think he's a very clever man. I think he's tripped himself up, and it's a shame. I think he could have gone out on a much better
He's
note.
been politic.
But
He's been
others here say
politicking
Boris
right out the
Johnson
room.
should have gone a long time ago.
You know, it's all
Clear cut
fucking
for
if
you.
buts, maybes. Ah, you should have known this guy was doing that, and so forth.
And I don't know how
He's done nothing
embarrassed the
that every
Conservative
other
ministers
politician
must be
isn't doing.
about the
His problem is, and this is what I used to get told quite a lot when I was younger.
Conservatives
Your
have a
problem is you
24,000
get caught.
majority here. But this is
It's
one
his
place
problem.
where,
He get
for Boris
fucking
Johnson,
caught.
It feels like
Idiot.
the last
And he get
years
caught
in
because
Chichester.
people turned against him and started.
Kennedy, BBC News.
And then as soon as
So,
the
two
herd
sets of
turns
views there in
against
terms
you,
of England, Northern England,
I heard that somewhere.
Don Valley, Doncaster, and then
you're fucked.
Chichester,
You're
just
out
to
the
give us a
game.
sense of the kind of combination of support that Boris Johnson was able to put together in December 19 to give him that majority of 80, which for most prime ministers would be a guarantee of a full term. But for a range of reasons that we've been reporting on, it's all come to an end long before a full term was up, because it is just 2.5 years since Boris Johnson was master of all he surveyed, really, with that mandate. Today, well, his party leadership's coming to an end. His time as Prime Minister will come to an end. His authority clearly has evaporated with most of his colleagues and from lots of voters, judging by those pieces.
Respect my authority!
His integrity and indeed his honesty. And of course, we heard earlier he's really now about trying to define some kind of legacy. So a journey with quite a few highs, quite a few lows. And our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, has been trying to assess what that legacy is about.
The day he fulfilled his childhood dream, walking into Downing Street as Prime Minister. The UK's decision to leave the EU had caused division and years of political upheaval.
We're going to fulfil the repeated promises of Parliament to the people and come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts.
Brexit caused turbulence, but it was a global pandemic that dominated Boris Johnson's time in office. Boris Johnson's path to the top was a well-trodden one. The 20th Prime Minister to be schooled at Eton, he went on to study classics at Oxford University.
The House will proceed to a division.
A career in journalism followed, with a stint in Brussels for The Telegraph, where he relished mocking the European Commission.
I didn't want to be totally stitched up here.
His profile was boosted by TV appearances. Mr Johnson later became the MP for Henley-upon-Thames, which he held until he was elected Mayor of London in 2008. He was the charismatic frontman, happy to perform for the cameras.
I'm going to have a point of video.
It's such an honour to have you here, Mr Mayor.
Oh, no way, I missed that.
Oh, no.
And the mishaps only added to the celebrity status.
Release the rings into position now.
In 2015, he returned to Parliament.
The bastion of independence.
And a year later endorsed Vote Leave, becoming the figurehead for the Brexit campaign, attracting adoring crowds as he travelled the country. His eventual reward was a stint as Foreign Secretary under Theresa May. When bitter arguments over Brexit brought her down,
Boris!
Conservative MPs pinned their hopes on a man who they believed to be a winner.
After 3 years and 2 missed deadlines, we must leave the EU.
For the first few months of his premiership, Brexit continued to be the most divisive of issues. Many in Parliament were determined to stop the UK leaving the EU without a deal. Mr Johnson kicked more than 20 rebel Tory MPs out of the party. He asked the Queen to
you're right, Alan, back to boring British
limiting
politics.
MPs' opportunities to oppose
It's
him.
like...
The move was challenged in the Supreme Court.
Ultimately, nothing really changes because politics is just like a theatre production to appease people.
Eventually, Mr Johnson decided
you
the
want
only
actors
option
like
was a
Bobo
general
and
election.
Trump in the game,
Brexit
at least.
done was the slogan at the heart of the Conservative
it makes
campaign.
shit a wee
It
bit
led
more
to a
worth watching,
decisive
man.
victory.
Especially when you deep down
Dozens of
believe
Labour
that
MPs were
it
beaten
doesn't
in areas
matter
that the
a
party
shit.
had held for decades.
No, he's resigned. He's remaining Prime Minister to the all. What the fuck?
Boris Johnson returned as Prime Minister, and this time Brexit was assured. His personal life was changing too. During his second marriage, which lasted 25 years, he'd had several affairs. He'd been sacked as a Conservative spokesman for lying about one of them. In spring 2020, he and his wife Marina divorced. He later married Carrie Simons, who'd previously worked as a Conservative Party advisor, and the couple had 2 children. For his new government, though, everything was put on hold when it was hit by the worst health crisis in modern times. As COVID spread, the NHS came under enormous pressure. In a televised address, Boris Johnson announced extraordinary restrictions to daily life.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
The Prime Minister himself became seriously ill with COVID.
Alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature.
He was admitted to intensive care and spent 3 days in hospital. A key ally throughout this time was
said that
Dominic
earlier,
Cummings.
buddy.
His
I want him to
unconventional
be.
style
I want him
aggravated
just
many.
for entertainment purposes
And
alone.
within a year of the election victory, he'd
I
resigned
mean,
after
he
a
is.
bitter
I don't
power
know if you
struggle,
ever
clashing
remember.
with Tory
Was that a
MPs
children's
and the
programme?
Prime
It was
Minister's
called The
wife.
Demon.
He soon went on the attack, becoming Mr. Johnson's fiercest and most damaging critic.
That is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
And we'd only got him in there because we had to solve a certain problem, not because we thought that he was the right person to run the country.
There were electoral losses too. The safe Buckinghamshire seat of Chesham and Amersham taken by the Liberal Democrats. Mr. Johnson faced an investigation over the complicated funding of a lavish refurbishment. And then stories started leaking about rule-breaking parties inside Number 10, while the rest of the country was in lockdown.
Fucking demon headmaster, man.
Mr. Johnson was fined for a birthday celebration in the cabinet room.
I've received a...
And he's as pure almost as emotionalist and robotic as him as well.
In Downing Street on the 19th of June 2020.
Wonder if we'll get a wee shot of
Altogether, over 120
Jacob
fines were issued to staff. A report by a senior civil servant blamed a failure of leadership, and Mr. Johnson was accused
remember,
of
folks,
lying
take
about
part
what went
in
on.
the poll.
I can announce
that
the
way.
Party does
Take part in the poll and thumbs it up.
Conservative MPs forced a
If
vote
you
of
appreciate
confidence. More than 40% of them
the
wanted him out,
streams.
but he refused to go.
At least get some shits and giggles.
The final straw was a chaotic response
Probably
to
the only
allegations of
YouTube
sexual
channel that
misconduct
touches on
against the Deputy
politics
Chief Whip,
that doesn't
Chris Pincher.
shove politics
Ministers
down
were
your
fed
throat.
up with defending the indefensible. Conservative MPs had had enough. Boris Johnson won them their biggest majority.
The only
for
trooper
more than
that
30
didn't join
years,
UKIP
fulfilled their dream of
when
leading
Sargon
the
of
EU,
Akkad done
but
it.
he was never
And
able to
everybody
translate his success on the campaign trail into government.
And they're all stuck that I'm not an NPC. I'm not an NPC. They are NPCs. They are NPCs. And all they do is they all fucking copy each other and sing from the same hymn sheets, blow smoke up each other's assholes, agree with each other, talk about the same talking points. And then point at the left wing and go, they are NPCs, they are NPCs, and they cannot see that rhyming and repeating the NPC meme is you being a fucking NPC. I am not an NPC, they are NPCs.
Whether that is a
Anyway.
course of action that
Fuck him out, that shit,
and
man.
others think is appropriate
Honestly,
in the
that's
circumstances,
I don't know
appropriate
if-
for a Prime
I don't know how
Minister whose
long
integrity and honesty has been
you have or
questioned
haven't been
repeatedly,
touching
and
base
is,
with
a
all these
big
channels
reason
and stuff.
as to why
It's the
the,
same old
the
shit
political world is in
about
the
10
state,
years ago.
that
Just
it is in
updated
today
in
with
a
this,
different
change
kind of
party leader and
different
Prime
colour
Minister
scheme.
in the offing.
Same
our
shit,
correspondent
and it's
Nick
always
with me
the
there.
end
Nick, I couldn't
is
help
now.
noticing,
The
as we
apocalypse
look for
is
the
now. It's
reactions
happening
of
now. This is the
MPs
worst is
to the
happening now.
statement
The
that you
collapse
and I
now,
heard
no,
here
no,
just a
no,
short
no,
while
no,
ago.
no. I'm
Lots
not
of
like the
reaction
fucking
from
obviously
Conservative
fucking
MPs
shit's going
is,
down.
let's just say,
but
disobliging. People
just
don't
the
seem
same
to be
old shit,
impressed with
man.
the tone.
And
they don't seem
see
to
if
be
you're
impressed
fucking
with his
on the
determination
poverty
to
line.
stay in
No
that building for
difference.
another few months. And they
No
question
difference.
whether this is a wise course of action. Now, do you sense that that
same shit
faction
applies? Just means
is
that you
bigger than the
only
faction
get to
saying
choose
he's
for
doing the
2
right thing?
mustards instead of
There's going to be
5.
an active debate over the next
And
few hours
one
about whether Boris Johnson will stay in post until a new
salad
Conservative
dressing
leader
instead of
is
5.
elected. That could take until
That's what I'm most
September.
annoyed
There are
about.
A lot of Tory MPs who listened to
I
what we
love
just
the
said
fucking
there,
Tesco
didn't
honey
like
and
the
mustard
language,
dressing.
and that's
Mine's
added
is
to their
nice as
feeling
well,
of
right
bad
enough.
blood that we've seen over the last
It's a
few
pain
days.
in the arse
They
and it
want
costs
to
more to make
change
your
a
own.
lot quicker
No
than
matter
Boris
what
Johnson
it
does. It does just feel though, Hugh, like this almost encapsulates what Boris Johnson's premiership.
Why it doesn't this Scottish guy fuck off back to Scotland and talk about the SNP?
Brexit, whether it was over his personality, whether it was over some of his
Why
more
doesn't he cough as
controversial
well?
domestic policies as well. Conservative
sounds like a guy
MPs for
that's
a
always
while
like
came out to bat for the
he's got
Prime
a frog in
Minister.
his
He
throat
was the man
constantly.
that won elections for his party. They could put up with him because they thought he was going to take them into electoral victory. That changed over the past 6 months. Partygate
Speak English, boy.
blew up this idea that Boris Johnson was someone that was good for the Conservative Party. There's been a growing
Right, this is just
sense
going
of
to
that
be
over
a
the last few
mobile
weeks,
fest,
as
isn't it?
You just heard
So,
from Vicky.
I'd
And
like
we've
to
reached this
thank
point now
everybody
where the man who
for joining.
2.5 years ago was political stardust, who delivered that
Tune
incredible
in
stonking
at
majority
4
for his
or 5
party,
o'clock-ish.
has now been forced out by his
I'm
own
going
party.
to
Politics
hit the
moves
gym and
extremely
then
quickly,
hit
Hugh.
the
I think I'll move
streets
quickly over the next few hours as
and
well.
go
We're
and
going to
check
be
out
talking
this
about who next, rather than
dude
Boris
Ryan, who's handed out his newspaper.
That is absolutely right.
The
And yet
light.
we are still talking about what lies ahead for the next few months, because if he is there as Prime Minister, he will have the power to do things.
Talk out of turn.
And there's a big amount of legislation going through Parliament as we speak. Some very big decisions to be made on the economy, which is clearly facing a very rocky patch still. So it's not a Prime Minister who's going to sit there and probably do nothing. And the tone of the statement itself is something that's annoyed people. Somebody saying just now, no hint of acknowledging what might have gone wrong, blaming a herd instinct among his own colleagues over at Westminster for his demise. It's not somebody who's being in any way
light newspaper, light as
at least not in that statement. The point I'm making is, will that statement make it more difficult?
So I don't know
for
if
him
it's
to stay
called
on there,
light,
because there'll be fewer people saying that it seems
or
to
it's
be
called
a wise course
light
of action.
newspaper.
Yes, I think the simple answer is
See?
yes. I've spoken to MPs already in the last hour or so who think exactly that.
Plus I'll meet some
it's
interesting
not
folk.
a uniform view. There are some, I think, who
all up for that
are just
shit,
so
man.
bruised by the last few days that they just want to go away and sit in a dark room for a while and just let this process play out over the next few weeks and months and try and allow the party to move on without any more bloodletting. Boris Johnson is no
the
longer
light
in control.
paper
He's in power
is
in the
calling
sense
it in
that
the
he still lives
text.
behind that door, but he doesn't control his party.
Distributing
He has a cobbled together
light
cabinet
paper
that is
to
not
folk.
the people who he wanted to be in those big jobs that govern
I'll see when I
important
get a
parts
print.
of our lives, like education,
shall
like
share.
Wales, like Northern Ireland, like levelling up, jobs that really matter.
Will give me
Boris
more or
Johnson
one
has had
take
to find
away.
who will take them rather than
Wants to
who
hear
he
my
wanted
thoughts,
to put in them.
and then
So the
they
next few
usually
hours,
hit
I
the
think,
pub.
could still be pretty rocky for the Prime Minister, but we now know, Hugh, he's on his way out, and soon attention will change to who the next Prime Minister is going to be.
It will. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thank you very much. Nick there with his latest thoughts. Nick Eardley, our correspondent. Let's go straight to the Green outside Parliament and talk to the SNP Member of Parliament, Richard Thompson, who is the party's shadow finance spokesman. Richard, thanks very much for joining us. We heard from the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, earlier, talking about, the chaos, as she called it, in Downing Street and at Westminster, but that ultimately,
do you ever forget
you're
doing a live stream?
Attitude to Scotland and the ambitions of the Scottish government for independence.
I'm just telling him I'll be with him about 5.
That, she said, would not change.
Don't
Now,
want to stress
do you think
himself
that is
out,
true,
man,
regardless
good
of
steam
the
and
range
sauna
of characters who could be in line to succeed Boris Johnson? Do you expect the party's approach?
Oh my God, it's
to
fucking
be
so good
the same
getting back into
whoever
good
gets it?
habits. I'm telling you,
I
man.
think we have to remember that whoever replaces Boris
Yeah,
Johnson
fucking few
as
days of
our
this shit,
Conservative
man.
Prime
Getting my
Minister
fucking
will
head
still
out
be
my
a
fucking
Conservative
lockdown
with the same
arsehole.
instincts and will still be of the Conservative Party that was happy.
Another
until
Scottish
the last
cunt!
24
What
hours
is it
to
with all
see,
these fucking
Boris
Scottish
Johnson in
cunts
office. So I
fucking
don't
running
expect
rampant
a
down in
significant change
Westminster?
in attitude from
Holyrood,
the
no enough for
Conservatives,
you?
and that
How many
one
pigs
change
at
in
the
attitude
trough
I
do
hope
we
that
need?
there might be with a new leader and the chance to reset relationships is to look afresh
Oi, oi,
at the request
Roberto!
which came from First Minister Nicola Sturgeon for what's known as a Section 30 order in order to establish a mutually agreed way forward.
How was things at the hospital, buddy? All good, I hope.
Holding a lawful independence referendum. But certainly in terms of the desire
I'm just about to do the
put
off, to be
question
honest,
again in
mate.
Scotland that we had in 2014, in light of all that we've experienced and the changed circumstances since Brexit, that remains unchanged, and it's a case which the merits of it stand regardless as to who occupies number 10 Downing Street.
He's big,
What are your
he's fat,
thoughts on the Prime Minister's plans to stay in
he's
power
known for
until
talking
probably,
crap. Boris
the first week maybe of
Johnson,
October
Boris
in the party conference
Johnson.
season,
He's
until
big,
there's a new
he's fat,
Conservative leader
he's known for
in
talking
place.
crap.
So,
Boris Johnson,
resigning as Conservative leader, but
Boris
hanging
Johnson.
on as Prime Minister until then.
Roberto, you
because
should join
he
a
says,
supporters
at
club,
least
mate,
his
and start
supporters say
coming up with
it's all
some
about the
chants.
functioning of government, it's all about continuity and all the rest of it. What is the SNP's approach to that?
Well, it's quite incredible, isn't it? I mean,
I'm going to do the off you all because I started early, Roberto, because Bobo's resignation speech. So I'll hopefully catch up with you tomorrow, or you can hit me up on the Skypes or whatever. But I hope everything was alright at the hospital, or as well as can be expected.
There are major issues facing the UK.
I'm sure it was good to see your old man anyway.
All the constituent parts of it.
And thanks for joining, everybody. everybody tune in at 5, between 4 and 5, so sub and bell up to get a notification, so you know what's up, man. And I'll be talking to Ryan, who's distributing the light.
That are needed in order to get through the cost of living crisis, for example, or to tackle
I love that
the
name,
security
man.
challenges that we face in Europe. So
if you put it on a stone,
frankly,
maybe somebody would blow it up.
Downing Street no later than this evening, and there should
just
be
like the Georgia Guidestone
to be put in place so that
anyway,
somebody else can take over who is able to restore.
Have a good afternoon, y'all, and hopefully tune in at 4, 5 o'clock. Catchies! Clips. And remember, citizens, always subscribe and hit the bell. Everything will be well in 1995. Plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Why does a dog wag its tail? Because a dog is smarter than its tail. If the tail were smarter, the tail would wag the dog. Wag the dog in politics is the act of creating diversion from a damaging issue. Here at Wag the Dog News, the tail doesn't wag the dog. Enjoy. Clip. And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the bell, everything will be well. 1995. Plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.